Hello everyone, I am Dr. Nivedita Chakrabarti. I'll be presenting a case of 33 years old female who came with right shoulder joint pain and anterior instability. She had a past history of shoulder dislocation. MRI of the right shoulder joint was done. So what impression do we have in our minds even before we look at the MRI? For that, let's have a look at what happens in anterior shoulder dislocation. This is the normal orientation of humeral head and glenoid in the neutral position. When there is a violent external rotation in abduction, the posterior superior humeral head impacts upon the anterior glenoid rim. This results in an anterior labral tear with or without anterior glenoid defect known as a Bankart lesion, and along with it there can be a defect in the posterior superior aspect of the humeral head due to impaction known as a Hill-Sachs defect. Let's see if these findings are present in our patient or not. So we do see a Hill-Sachs defect as shown by the red arrow on the axial proton density image. In the corresponding sagittal image, we see that the Hill-Sachs defect is seen at the level of the superior margin of the coracoid process. We should always remember that the Hill-Sachs defect is seen at or above the level of the coracoid process. We need to measure the transverse dimension and the depth of the Hill-Sachs defect. In this image, the red arrow points to the normal mild concavity in the humeral head below the level of the coracoid process. The reason for showing this image is that we should not misinterpret this normal concavity for Hill-Sachs defect. As I have already stated, a Hill-Sachs defect is seen at or above the level of the coracoid process. In these sagittal and axial proton density images, we see that there is remodeling of the anterior glenoid along with the presence of osseous prominence as shown by the red arrow. This suggests that there was a detached bone fragment in the past which has now reunited with the glenoid. So, this is an old healed osseous Bankart lesion. Since the osseous fragment has united, we won't be able to mention the percentage of glenoid bone loss here, but we need to give the dimensions of the osseous prominence. But remember, whenever we see a case of a Bankart lesion with a glenoid defect, we have to mention the percentage of glenoid bone loss. Let me show you the method of measuring the percentage of glenoid bone loss in another patient who had a bony Bankart lesion. This is the end-face sagittal view of a normal glenoid. The green arrow shows the normal convex margin of the anteroinferior glenoid. This is the image of the patient having a Bankart lesion. As we can see here, the red arrow points to the flattened anteroinferior margin of the glenoid, suggestive of a Bankart lesion. So let's calculate the percentage of glenoid bone loss for this patient. The percentage of glenoid bone loss is assessed on the end-face sagittal image of the glenoid using the best fit circle method. We draw a circle whose size best fits the posterior and the inferior margins of the glenoid as shown here. Then we measure the diameter of the circle. Then we measure the glenoid bone loss by drawing a line from the anterior margin of the circle to the anterior margin of the injured glenoid. Now this glenoid bone loss divided by the best fit circle diameter multiplied by 100 gives a percentage of the glenoid bone loss, which in our case is 22%. So what significance does this percentage of glenoid bone loss have? The surgical management decisions change based on the percentage of glenoid bone loss. If there is less than 15% glenoid bone loss, then only soft tissue repair of the labrum and capsule is done. If the glenoid bone loss is between 15 and 30, then the extent of physical activity of the patient will decide whether bone augmentation to correct the glenoid bone defect needs to be done or not. And if more than 30% glenoid bone loss is present, then bone augmentation is compulsorily performed. Therefore, we must always mention the percentage of glenoid bone loss in a patient having a bony Bankart lesion which has not healed. Now let's get back to our case. We see that the entire anterior labrum is torn and buckled into the glenohumeral joint as shown by the red arrow. The labral tear extends across 12 o'clock position to the posterior superior quadrant as well as shown by the green arrow. In these coronal stir images, we see that the labral tear is seen extending into the biceps labral complex, splitting it. In these axial and sagittal images, we see an intra-articular osseous body in the superior subscapularis recess. Whenever we see a loose intra-articular body, we have to mention its location, its dimension in 3 planes, and the site from which that body has originated, known as the donor site. In our case, the donor site is definitely the anteroinferior glenoid. Here we see another intra-articular osseous body in the axillary recess. This coronal stir image shows that there is an undersurface more than 50% supraspinatus critical zone tendon tear as shown by the red arrow. The green arrow shows a footprint of the supraspinatus tendon which is intact. The footprint refers to the portion of the tendon which inserts to the greater tuberosity. The critical zone is approximately 1 cm proximal to the insertion. The yellow arrow points to the mild subacromial subdeltoid bursal fluid. Tendon test should always be measured in 2 dimensions, and the thickness of the tendon affected should also be mentioned. So finally, the impression of our report should contain the following 4 points. Anterior instability with a Hill-Sachs lesion and healed osseous Pankart lesion. Large entire anterior labral tear extending across 12 o'clock position to the posterior superior quadrant with extension into the biceps labral junction, splitting it. So this is a SLAP 4 tear. There are various types of SLAP tears. The most important thing is to give a proper description of the labral tear. We also need to mention that anteroinferior labrum is buckled into the joint. Intra-articular bodies in the superior subscapularis and axillary recesses, donor site being the anterior glenoid. More than 50% thickness under surface critical zone supraspinatus tendon tear. So what are the take-home messages? Do not misinterpret normal flattening of the humeral head inferior to the level of coracoid process as Hill-Sachs defect. Look for Hill-Sachs defect at and superior to the level of the coracoid process. Always mention the percentage of glenoid bone loss as it affects management. In presence of intra-articular loose bodies, mention their number, location, dimensions and the donor site. Thank you.